Welcome to the Insights to Communicate podcast with Adam Probalski, where market and opinion research come together with public affairs and PR.
And I've got Marco Paredes with me for this episode. Marco is a shareholder with the firm of Stearns Weaver Miller, based in Tallahassee. He also leads their government affairs practice. He's known for being a lobbyist, and I think he's proud of that. And that's a good thing. We need good practitioners in the advocacy world. We met a few years ago, I think, Marco. I think I had a client that had some gaming issues in Florida that we chatted about. I think might have been the subject matter.
It's funny. You were on a podcast that I heard about, and I reached out to you, and we ended up finding that we had mutual interest in gaming. You had a client, so yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. I love it when that just works out like that.
Yep.
So I'd love to hear about your path that you took to where you are today. In some ways, it's typical, but in some ways, it's kind of not. You took a couple left turns, or turns, not trying to add political philosophy to it necessarily. Why don't you just tell us quickly your story of how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I'm originally from Miami, born and raised. Went to undergrad at the University of Miami. And, from the time I was in college, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. So did well at University of Miami and was accepted at several schools, but I ultimately chose to go to Georgetown. So I went to Georgetown University Law Center. I had a great experience there for 3 years in the nation's capital. And it's funny, I mean, the law school itself is just a couple of blocks from the Capitol, or the U.S. Capitol, and I had no idea what lobbying was. I didn't even know, that there was any kind of role that you could represent clients before government. So doing my 3 years in Georgetown, had my mind set on going to a big city, and working as a lawyer at a law firm, and ended up actually taking a job going back home to Miami. With the county government. They had a county attorney's office that is one of the best in the country. It's a pretty large county attorney's office. So started my legal career there, actually representing the county, defending the county in tort suits, and was doing that for a couple weeks. And then the person who was my mentor, who's still someone that is a mentor of mine even now, he was my mentor when I was there for my second year summer. He got a job working for the mayor at the time as an intergovernmental affairs director. And I remember after a couple of weeks of him in the job, we had lunch, and I asked him, what do you do? Because I had no idea what an intergovernmental affairs director was. And, he mentioned that he was going to DC, meeting with, White House staff, and going to Congress, and going to Tallahassee and lobbying. And I asked him, what do you actually do? And he kind of explained to me, and thought it was great, but didn't think that, anything more of it. And couple months after that, he reached out to me, and there was a county commissioner who had just been elected, and she was looking for a legislative aide. And he reached out to me and asked if I was interested. And, you talk about left turns. I mean, I that was my first left turn, because I left kind of the practice of law and was a legislative aide for a county commissioner, albeit in a pretty significant, county in Miami-Dade County. But I did that for about a year and got my first lobbying job for Miami Children's Hospital. I was their director of government affairs for 3 years, and I did federal, state, and local lobbying there. And it's just been kind of, more progression since. And, fast forward 18 years, I'm now a shareholder at a law firm, so I'm kind of back in the legal world, but albeit I still love what I do. I still lobby. So I represent our legal clients before the legislature here in Florida, and also before the executive branch as well.
It is kind of fun how people don't really know this is a business. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And most people couldn't handle it. That's probably
right.
better off than you know. So uh, let's talk about that for a second. Kind of your sweet spot. That's one of my typical things that I want to know, because I mean, I know land use lobbyists, and I know people who work on contract procurement, and I know lobbyists who are pretty much anything in the legislature, or they focus on one policy area in the legislature. But it seems like you do work at all different levels of government. But what's your sweet spot? What's that like perfect client or two that you want them to show up and be like, here's our project?
Sure. So it's funny, for the longest time, a lot of the jobs that I had were in the healthcare field. So I would have, if we would have been having done this interview, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I would have said healthcare was my sweet spot. But since being with Stearns Weaver Miller, my sweet spot, at least subject area wise, has been land use. I represent a lot of developers, and typically there are larger developers who, because of the way state law is written, local governments have a lot of discretion on types of developments that can move forward in the state. However, you can always preempt, and so we usually have a lot of developers who end up having some issues locally, and we find that there are other developers similarly situated, and that really opens the door for a statewide solution to some of the growth issues. But if I had to choose kind of my sweet spot in terms of process, it is having a client, a business in the state that, maybe has never hired a lobbyist, maybe doesn't know anything about the legislature, and they're looking for someone to navigate this business issue that's impacting their bottom line, navigate how to solve it. And I love being able to meet with people, educate, because I think first and foremost, as a lobbyist, I'm an educator, whether that's an educator of my clients, the issues that I advocate on, but I also like to educate my clients as well, because some of my clients, they've never even been to the Capitol. They may not even know who their local, legislator is. And so I'm able to not just educate members when I'm meeting with them on issues, but I'm also able to educate my clients on how the process works and demystify it, really, and show that, lobbying is not this, kind of, dirty word type of business that, granted, there's definitely issues in the industry, but if you can get a client that has a true real world issue that you can go before legislators to say, these are businesses in your state that are having this real world problem that's impacting, a lot of people, and here's our solution that not just is good for them, but is good statewide. I mean, to me, that's been, kind of my bread and butter. And I've had a lot of those types of clients, thankfully, in the last couple of years being here at the firm, where we've had legal clients that have had issues, significant issues, and it's been the lawyer that's representing them that knows that I'm in-house and is able to reach out to me and say, hey, I've got a client that's got this issue. I thought maybe you might be able to help. And I've been able to, come in and provide some relief.
That's awesome. And it's always nice to, I think it's important to recognize that, yes, there's a public perception about lobbying out there, but that narrative really isn't real. You're talking to people. You're not handing over bags of anything. You're having conversations, sending emails, and attending events to be able to have conversations. So that's cool. What role, obviously a pollster, we do a lot of public opinion research, but we expect in a lot of cases, the work that you do, that public opinion plays a role in the work you do, because you need to kind of show that you have either public opinion on your side, or you're going to kind of do no harm, where the public isn't going to be upset about, whatever legislative action, whether it's local or state. What role does public opinion play in the advocacy you're doing? How much do you have to kind of, prove that there's public support for what you're up to?
Sure. I mean, I think it plays a part. It just, I guess, depends on the degree and the issue. So I'll give you, kind of a couple examples. A recent example is we're working in a locality here in Florida, in Central Florida, for a major developer client. and this is more at the local level. I do some local lobbying, not a lot, but just some. And this is a client that I represent here in Tallahassee before the state legislature, but they're having an issue locally with, wanting to get the county to put a initiative on the ballot for a increase in the local sales tax, which is going to provide some relief ultimately for what are known as impact fees that, as a developer, they have to pay. And so we actually, myself and another one of my partners, we commissioned a poll to show the local government there that there is support for what we're asking. And it's been helpful. I mean, it's still, we still have a long way to go before it gets on the ballot for 2024. But being able to show that there's a poll that in a really very red Republican county in Florida, that voters would willingly increase the sales tax. That's powerful, to show that. Especially at a local level, because your local and having worked for a local politician, they really do care what the people on the ground think. But then when you kind of pull back and you go to the to the state level, it really depends on the issue. A lot of the issues that I work on are kind of localized and really don't work with a lot of polling. I have worked on some issues, though, for example, in the healthcare field, where, if I was working for a payer or I work for a health plan and we're trying to advocate for an increase in, a specific service or an increase in reimbursement for a specific, drug or what have you, we do try to show that, polling shows that you've got people in the state that do want to see more from their Medicaid benefits. They want to see more from their private insurance benefits. So, I think it kind of depends on the issue, but I've definitely have, turned to polling to help kind of amplify what the issues that I'm advocating on.
Oh, that's cool. You are like pretty prolific in like the LinkedIn world and the podcast world, and you're kind of a, I'm kind of the same way, a little self-promoter, but in a way that you're really kind of informing and giving added value to your audience.
Sure.
Not every professional does that. Actually, a lot of professionals don't. A lot of lawyers and lobbyists and even public affairs professionals, they just kind of like stay in this lane. They get a couple of referrals. They go to a few events. So talk about kind of being out there in that way. Like, how did you maybe, who turned you on to be promoting like that? And is it productive? Have you seen it,
Sure. Well, first, Adam, I appreciate that, and I hope everybody knows I did not pay to say that. So I appreciate I appreciate that sentiment you shared. Look, it's taken me, my time here at the firm to realize, especially nowadays with social media, that you have to use it to promote yourself. You got to be a self promoter, really, because no one else is going to promote you better than you promote yourself. And initially, when I first started, and I have to give, here a lot of, props to our marketing team at the firm. We have a great marketing team. They work with our practice groups. They really help us hone in on how to best market our practice groups. And my practice group, when I joined the firm back in 2019, was brand new to the firm. The firm had never had a government affairs practice. So, I come in, they had no idea, we just hired you. Where do we put your announcement? I mean, they didn't even know. We have a pretty prolific, state political website and email list that goes out. That's called Sunburn. And, I immediately said, well, we got to be in Sunburn. And, so my announcement joining the firm was in Sunburn. They had never, really heard that. And it's been kind of, letting them know kind of, where it's important for me to promote. But then they're also big on LinkedIn. So they're always, whenever I'm on a podcast, like, your podcast, I'm going to share it, they're going to share it and then I'm going to share it. But if I'm on a podcast, if I write an article or something, they're quick to produce a post and they tell you, share it, promote it, do all that. And, Initially, it seems like no one is paying attention and no one's listening.
Right.
I will tell you what the one thing that's worked. So, can't remember if I started this last year or the year before. I think I started it the year before, but Florida's got a 60-day session, and then we have 7 weeks of committee weeks prior to session. So 2 years ago, so during COVID, actually, let me back up. During COVID, one of my partners and marketing kind of put together what we call the COVID Compass. So it was this massive newsletter that we would send out to all of our clients that essentially collected all government actions around COVID, federal, state, and local. It was a massive effort. I mean, if you think back to COVID, I mean, we were writing down all the governor's executive orders on COVID, all local orders on COVID, what Congress was doing on, all the various bills that we're going through. I mean, it was a massive effort. And, we kind of, came out of COVID and, didn't really need to keep working on that. And then I remember my partner and I having a discussion about it. His name is Reggie. And, he kind of said, we need to come up with something for government affairs that goes out externally, because it promotes you. And, initially I was just sending out emails internally to the firm, but I needed to send something out externally. So I kind of came up with this concept of, look, everybody gets emails, newsletters that are too long to read. So I want to produce something that just has 5 points. What are the 5 most important things you need to know every week of committee week and every week of session? And I called it the Rotunda Report. My wife actually is the one that suggested that name, Rotunda Report. And it's great. And that's what I've been doing for 2 years. And it's funny, I was at my son's baseball game earlier this week, and a friend of mine who sometimes we're on opposite sides. He represents local governments at the Capitol, but we're friends. But he introduced me to his wife, and he was like, "Oh, this is Marco. He and I are usually working on the opposite sides," and we kind of chuckled. And then I turned and said, "Hi, I'm Marco," and she said, "Oh yeah, I know. I get your email." And I've gotten that kind of response. I get so many people, so thankful that I put together just 5 bullets because I wanted it to be something that everyone could just scan really quickly, and you can kind of tell, okay, this week legislature focused on these kind of big things. And I try to focus not things that are in the news, because there's a lot of bills, and I'm sure you've seen the news as well, that have been written about ad nauseum. So I try to focus on bills that are important for businesses. And that's actually found kind of an audience, and it's been kind of cool. And, unfortunately for me, on top of the work that I have to do, because, I'm looking at the Capitol right now here in my conference room, and I need to be at that building during session doing my job, talking to people, finding out information, doing all that. But I also have to get content ready to send out. And I usually try to send out the content on Fridays. So unfortunately, I've kind of dug myself a hole because it's been kind of successful, but I need to continue to produce content. So, but I'm still going to keep doing it. I do like that it's something that's just short and quick, and people can scan it and they're kind of up to date. So I would say, to professionals and practitioners, especially lobbyists, if you're looking for something to do, I think brevity is important. I think we live in a world where, we get massive amounts of emails and newsletters, and they're just so long to read that we just never even bother. And if you can just read something that's on just one screen and you can just scan through it pretty quickly and be informed, I think that's a home run.
Yeah, I love that. I've seen your Rotunda Report. I think it's fantastic. It's kind of like the Axios approach versus the Politico approach. I can't, my head explodes when I see the Politico newsletter. I can't do it. But I can look at Axios because it gives me 3 points, and that's all I have to know. I like that a lot. All right, so that brings me to a good point. You just kind of referenced it. How do you organize your life professionally? I'm always interested in people's tech stack, how they do it. How do you are you a legal pad and pen kind of guy? Or are you everything's in your Outlook or your Google Calendar? What systems do you use to kind of get stuff done?
Sure. So, I'll be honest, Adam. I wish I could tell you I had the perfect system, but I keep going back and forth between pen and technology. So I am the kind of person that I'll write like little notes if I'm on the phone and I need to write down like a number or like a quick note. I've got kind of like I do one of these like these, kind of notebooks. But during session and when I'm in the Capitol, I don't like carrying a lot of stuff with me because I've found in my career that when I'm in the Capitol, if I'm carrying stuff, I'll leave it, I'll forget it, and thankfully. Sometimes there's confidential material in there, of issues I'm working on, and I don't want anyone else to see it. But thankfully, it's always been returned. It's never been an issue. But so I learned a long time ago, no paper. If I need paper, the schedule is available, in the House or the Senate. I can always pick that up and write on that. But other than that, I usually don't go into the Capitol except with my phone. So during session, I'm phone based. I stick with my email, my calendar. If it's not on my email or my calendar, then I just don't know about it. When in that busy time where I'm just constantly walking back and forth and I'm running between committee meetings and members, it's just my phone. When it's a little slower, I'll use a legal pad. I'll use my notebook. I'll use, just sticky notes. And, my desk does have a stack of sticky notes. Sometimes I forget about, but, I think it really depends on my day, but definitely when I'm the busiest, which is during session, I rely on my phone a lot.
That's cool. I like the idea of not having stuff, so that sounds very refreshing, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah,
it's. Well, I was just going to say that I see lobbyists in there. They've got briefcases, they've got iPads, they've got just all this kind of stuff, and I just love being able to just have my phone. So
it makes you. I think it makes you look more like a pro too. Like you're not, you're not Mr. Gadget.
It makes you look like that's what's going on because you don't have to have any extra stuff because you just know what's going to happen. So I guess that's a benefit too.
Yeah. All right. So on the personal side, do you ever fully unplug and not think business and just totally do something else, outdoors, family, or is that like a fantasy and that's something that happens when you retire?
I do unplug, but I mean, again, the kind of the double-edged sword about the phone thing is I always have it with me and I've got my email on there. And so it's hard not to check it. People text me all the time on issues, clients, members. So, I check those as well. So, what I've tried to do in my rule, and this has just been more in the last couple of years as I've gotten a little older, I used to make myself available 24/7. Even when, my kids were younger, I just make myself available. But as I've gotten a little older, I think, my rule is if it's an emergency or if it's something that I know it's a deadline and it's over the weekend or it's like, Monday, 9 a.m., we got to get this done and I got to work, that's one thing. But if it's something that can wait, if it's not pressing, I really won't even check my email sometimes over the weekend if I know it's not a pressing need. If I'm in session, that's the one time that I'm still on 24/7 and I'm checking emails because, when you get into the later half of session, especially if I'm working with a client that has an appropriation, that's when budget committee, conference committee meetings are meeting. They're meeting over the weekends. And so, you got to be aware of, meeting notices. You got to be aware of, when, kind of the budgets are coming out. So, and then bills and amendments are getting filed over the weekends as well. So, so for 60 days, I'll tell you that being unplugged is a fantasy, but the rest of the time I really try to stick to the rule where, I try to put my phone down and I don't really try to be on it and check email. Sometimes I can't, sometimes I just can't, but I really try to keep that rule, as something that I follow.
That's cool. Like, I think a lot of us are in that role where when things are happening, there's no, and our families just understand that you may have to leave that environment and do something. Okay, let's wrap with personal credo. You want to share something that drives you, that one thing that moves you, or some advice maybe you'd rather give. What's the
Sure. I really don't have a personal credo. I mean, there's a lot of people that I do follow. when it comes to like kind of, so Jocko Willink is somebody that I really like. He's a former Navy SEAL who writes a lot about leadership. He's got a book called Discipline Equals Freedom. So, discipline is kind of a buzzword with me. I think you need to be disciplined. So I kind of have a discipline during session, get into the office early, try to get to the Capitol early, do my meetings early, that kind of stuff. But, what I would share for others is something that I think has really helped me in my career, which is networking. You have to, especially if you're an advocate, you have to be able to talk to people, and not talk to people because you think they can help you, but talk to people to learn about them, learn from them. And that'll create a relationship that you have no idea where that's going to go in the future. They could be a potential client. They could be your next job. They could bring you business. You just never know where a conversation or a relationship is going to go. So, I think when you hear networking, a lot of people immediately think, I need to meet people to get a job, or I need to meet people, to grow my business. But I think what I found is just meet people and get to know who they are, get to know more about what they do, but, really try to get to know them and establish a relationship. And, if something comes out of it, great. And if it doesn't, you've just created another relationship that potentially, could develop into something else later down the line.
I think you kind of adopt one part of my personal credo, and that is be curious. That's kind of what be curious, and you never know what comes from it.
That's right.
I like that. It's hard. I think the truth is it's hard for a lot of us, professionals in general in the service industry to like talk to someone and not be thinking of how we can do some business with this person. Like it's kind of like if you sell insurance, like everyone's a prospect. A little bit different for you and I, but the truth is that like I think that's a really great approach. Just come at it with, I'm going to meet someone and learn about them, and who knows where that goes, but I'm going to learn something for sure.
Yep. That's, I think you just have to be interested in people and just learning about them, and then, letting the chips fall where they may. There's always an opportunity for something to turn into something else, but, you can't control that. So you might as well just create a relationship and see what happens. Very
cool. How should people, there's probably a lot of ways, but what's the way you want people to track you or reach out to you if they want to see what you're up to or reach out to you?
Sure. Yeah. So they can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's one way. You also email me. I believe my email is on LinkedIn, but if not, it's mparedes@stearnsweaver.com. And I'm happy to, kind of connect with anybody to talk about some of the things I've talked about or anything else that I can help with.
Cool. Very cool. The FLA expert for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Marco, really appreciate it. We will hopefully connect again soon. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
This has been Insights to Communicate with Adam Probalski, president of the woman and Latina-owned market and opinion research firm, Probalski Research.